Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today's shiur is brought to you in honor of the speedy refuah shlema of Rachel Bas Chaya Etel, and with absolutely no further ado, let's jump right into it. Parshat Shoftim on page 1024 in the stone. The pasuk says, "Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha." Judges and officers. You have to have a very robust justice system. It's not like an accident that there's so many Jews who are attorneys. It's not like, they ran out of all the space in the medical school, so the Jews started to go to Cardozo. No, we are a very, very accustomed people when it comes to legality. Shoftim v'shotrim, judges and officers, titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha. You will put in all of your gates. Asher Adonai Elohecha nosein lecha l'shvatecha, that God gives you for your tribes. V'shavtu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they will judge the people righteously. They can't have these like kangaroo courts like you read about in the news that Putin threw Navalny into another 16 years in the Gulag in Siberia. Like that's not a real court. That's not a real court. That's not mishpat tzedek, right? That's not righteous judgment. No. V'shavtu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. It says it right here in the art scroll. Wonderful. Next pasuk. Lo Tateh Mishpat, lo sakir panim, v'lo sikach shochad. Do not pervert justice. Do not recognize faces, meaning don't play favorites. V'lo sikach shochad, and don't take bribes. Ki hashochad ya'aver inei chachamim v'salef divrei tzadikim. Because bribes blind the eyes of the wise, and they convolute, meaning they make a mushkababble, they mix up divrei tzadikim, the words of the righteous. Once again, I want to make sure I understand this. The first pasuk said that you're going to have judges and officers, and they will adjudicate the people with righteousness. V'shavtu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, they will have righteous judgment. Fantabulous. Now, if I would go into the kindergarten, literally right across from where I'm sitting right now in my office is the lower school, and if I was to walk into that side of campus and I would go into the kindergarten and I would ask the 5-year-olds, I say, guys, do you think it's good to have a court system? They'd be like, yeah, great to have judges. Yeah, 100%. I said, do you think we should judge people righteously or not righteously? They'd be like, so Rabbi Sprung, of course we have to judge righteously. Okay, good. Now, can you give me maybe some examples of things that would be unrighteous judgment? And I would ask this of the 5-year-olds, okay? So they're not the most intellectually mature kids on this campus. I think that they would all say, well, obviously don't take a bribe. That's number one. And I say, well, you can't play favorites. Because, Yankee's my friend and Cindy is not, and I'm going to side with Yankee. That's called, that's not good. That's not good. So even the 5-year-olds know that when we say V'shavtu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, that you have to adjudicate the people righteously with proper judgment, we can all agree that some examples of things that are not righteous judgment would be exactly what it says in the next pasuk. Because the next pasuk says, Lo Tateh Mishpat, don't pervert justice. Yeah. I done already told you that in the first sentence. The first sentence was Mishpat Tzedek, a righteous judgment. Well, a righteous judgment means not to pervert justice, doesn't it? So why does the next pasuk tell me, Lo Tateh Mishpat, Lo Sakir Panim, V'lo Sikach Shochad, don't pervert justice, don't play favorites, don't take a bribe? You already told me that in the first pasuk. Now, what you could say, which is true procedurally, you could say to me, yeah, but lav or lav belav. You could say, well, you had a positive commandment to have a good court, a righteous court, and now you have negative commandments to preclude from people going against that and doing the opposite, which is true. You can get away with that from a systems perspective. That would work procedurally. However, I think it leaves a lot to be desired in the pasuk, because if the pasuk already told you mishpat tzedek, it doesn't stand to reason that it now has to give you examples of what mishpat tzedek doesn't look like. Very strange. Furthermore, lo Tateh Mishpat, do not pervert justice. Lo sakir panim, do not recognize faces, meaning don't play favorites. V'lo sikach shochad, and don't take a bribe. Would you not say that playing favorites and taking bribes are two examples of the perversion of justice? Meaning it's not only that the second pasuk is redundant because of the first one, it's redundant on its face. It's the Department of Redundancy department. Lo Tateh Mishpat, don't pervert justice. V'lo sakir panim, and don't play favorites. V'lo sikach shochad, and don't take bribes. Yes, those are examples of perversions of justice. So it's not bad enough that you're telling me don't do the negative of the thing that I already told you had to do, but now let me give you a few very specific examples of what the negative might be, because maybe you're not sufficiently imaginative to concoct how it would be possible to pervert justice. I mean, I don't think you have to look too hard to find examples of that. You can open up a newspaper, you see it every day. So that's bizarre, doubly bizarre. But the truth is, it's much, much worse than that. I mean, it's much, much worse than that. Again, let's read the second pasuk. Lo Tateh Mishpat, don't pervert justice. Lo sakir panim. Sorry, it's not lo sakir panim. It's just lo sakir panim. Lo Tateh Mishpat, do not pervert justice. Lo sakir panim, do not play favorites. Lo sikach shochad, and don't take bribes. Ki hashochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salev divrei tzadikim. Because bribes blind the eyes of the wise and mix up the words of the righteous. Oh, that's what bribes do. Oh. Well, thank goodness the Torah told me why I shouldn't take a bribe. Because when you told me not to pervert justice, the Torah didn't see fit to give you a reason. It thought that you might, be able to figure it out on your own. And when it said not to play favorites, it just said lo sakir panim. It didn't say don't lo sakir panim because it knocks the elbows of the righteous. It just says lo sakir panim, don't play favorites. Well, obviously you know why not to play favorites, because it's a perversion of justice. And yet, the lo sikach shochad, and don't take bribes, because bribes blind the eyes of the wise and muddle the words of the righteous. Thank you so much, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for explaining to me how taking a bribe might be a perversion of justice. Come on, the Torah has to give you a reason for bribes, but not for the previous two. Now, of course, the question is even better than that. You see, right? It's much better than that, because the pasuk didn't say don't pervert justice, don't play favorites, and don't take bribes because they muddle your vision. No. The Torah said, don't pervert justice, no reason. Don't recognize faces, no reason. And don't take bribes, 2 reasons. 2 reasons! 1 reason would not have been enough. It's like, and don't take bribes. Because the bribes blind the eyes of the wise and mix up the words of the righteous. So apparently the Torah thinks that you need both reasons for why you shouldn't take a bribe. And that's astonishing. It's a lot of fun. Okay, fine. We'll pretend it doesn't bother us and we'll move right on to the next pasuk, to the third pasuk in our parsha. Tzedek tirdov. Justice you shall pursue. Once we're in redundancies, you may as well say justice. Tzedek. Justice. You couldn't just say tzedek tirdov, you shall pursue justice. No. Tzedek. Justice, you shall pursue. In order that you will inherit the land that Hashem your God gives you. Didn't the first sentence tell me, V'shoftu esa'am mishpat tzedek? Did the first pasuk not tell me that the judges and officers that I set up must adjudicate the people righteously? Yes, I did say that. And then I told you the negative of that with 3 different examples, one of which has 2 reasons. Now in the third sentence, I have to go back and say, by the way, you better pursue justice, which you already told me. So the first 3 sentences in Parshat Shoftim, it turns out, seemingly very, very elementary psukim, but it turns out not that way. They're hard to read. They're very hard to read. Okay. Well, since we are, after all, in Sefer Devarim, you can expect to have a lot of do-not-dos, so let's just keep that on the shelf and move on. Next pasuk. Lo sitalacha asher kol eitz mizbach Adonai Elohecha asher ta'aselach. Do not plant any avodah zarah trees. Do not plant pagan idolatries next to Hashem's altar. Okay, noted. I won't do that. Got it. And do not establish for yourself a monument that Hashem doesn't like. Do not sacrifice to Hashem your God an ox or a lamb, asher yeh bo mum, that has a blemish, kol davara, anything bad, because it is abominable to Hashem. Hashem doesn't like that kind of stuff. Okay, so I got it. We have to have good judges, and they can't pervert justice, and I have to pursue justice, and I shouldn't have an idolatrous tree next to Hashem's altar, and I shouldn't have a monument that God hates, and I shouldn't bring animals that are blemished. Okay? The Torah continues. When it will be found in one of your gates, asher Adonai Elohecha nosein lach, that Hashem your God gives you, isha, a man or a woman, asher yaseh sarah b'nei Adonai Elohecha lavor b'riso, who does, a man or a woman who does a terrible thing to undo Hashem's covenant, vayilach vayavod Elohim acharim vayishtachu lahem, and they go and they worship idols and bow to them. And to the sun, or the moon, or the stars, or really any galaxy or celestial body that I did not command you to do. And it was told to you when you heard it. v'darashta heitev, and you will look into it very, very well, very deeply. V'hinei emes nachon hadavar, and oh my goodness, it was true. Nesisa hatoiva hazos b'Yisrael. This calamitous, horrible thing, this disgusting abomination of people worshiping pagan gods has happened among the Jewish people. And you will take out that man, or that woman, who did this horrible thing. You took them out to their gates where they did it. The man or the woman, and you're gonna stone him to death. They're on the mouth of 2 Adim, 2 witnesses, or 3 witnesses, they shall die. They can't be put to death just because one guy says they did it. You have to have at least 2. And then the witnesses that are the ones who come to the court who said, I saw Chaim Yankel do this terrible thing, they're the ones who have to be, their hand is going to be first in stoning Yankel. Very nice. So of course that makes a lot of sense of why you would tell me. Obviously in Parshat Shoftim, if we're in the Parsha of Shoftim anyway, it makes perfect intuitive sense why you would tell me that how many witnesses you have to have. Like maybe I would think 1 witness is enough to kill somebody. Kamash Malan, we learn from the Torah that it's not. And then why do you have to say 2 or 3? Because maybe I would think that if 2 witnesses say this and 3 witnesses say that 3 is better than 2 because it's numerically superior. Kamash Malan, Torah is saying there is no difference between 2 and 3. It's called a set. A set can be 2, a set can be 200. It doesn't matter. A set is a set. Okay, so that is all perfectly placed right here in Parshat Shoftim. After all, we have to know what the legal mechanism is for capital punishment. Wonderful. What's the problem? The problem is that for some reason, smack bang in the middle of telling me about halachic jurisprudence, in the middle of describing to me the justice system, that you're going to have these righteous judges and these righteous officers, and this is what they're going to do, and they can't pervert the system, and this is how we're going to deal with capital punishment with terrible people when they go and they do pagan worship, and like all of that makes perfect sense. What's the problem? The problem is right in the middle of it where we're like, excuse me, we forgot to tell you that you can't plant an idolatrous tree next to God's altar. Maybe we should tell you that now because you didn't know that. You didn't know that. Maybe you would have thought that you can, in fact, plant an idolatrous tree next to Hashem's altar. And the Torah's like, no, please don't plant an idolatry next to the Mizbeach Hashem. Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you for telling me. You're telling me now because I haven't heard it before. It's not like in the last parsha or the parsha before. It's not like we heard already that you can't have an idolatry, except for the fact that you have, because in the last 2 weeks, in fact, it says Vasherehem tisrafun ba'esh or Vasherehem tigadeun. It said it in Parshas Re'eh and it said it in Parshas Ekev already that you're not allowed to have idolatries. So why are you telling me again now for the 3rd time? That's weird. You already knew that you couldn't. Well. So perhaps you'll say that, no, really that comes agav the matzeva. I mean, the only reason that the Torah is repeating the Asherah, the idolatry, is because it comes along with the monument. And it's telling you that, no, Hashem really hates monuments. You can't have a monument. Oh, okay, that's good. So at least that's a chiddush. That's new. It's not like the last 2 parshas also told me about monument. Oh, no, my bad. My bad. The same time it told you about the idolatry, it told you about the matzeva. Because 4 things always go in a row. It's Mizbechosam Titosun, Matzevosam Teshaberun, Vasherehem Tisrafun Ba'esh, Uvsilei Elohem Tegadeyun, which means you're going to destroy their altars and their monuments and their idolatries and their icons. So the idolatry and the monument always go together and have, in fact, since the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar. So you already knew about both of those things. So please kindly tell me why you are repeating them to me again for the 3rd time. Then at least you have the next pasuk. That one fits. Baruch Hashem, that one fits. Lo sisbach Hashem Elokecha shor v'aseh. Don't bring an animal as a korban, as a sacrifice, if it has a mum, if it has a blemish, right? Like, now this is like an intuitive commandment, right? You can't bring, for your korban Pesach, you're going to bring God a lamb, and it's going to have, like a 3-legged lamb. You can't bring God Hashem a 3-legged lamb. You can't do that. No, you can't do that. That's a mum. That's a blemish. Come on. You know, bring a blind cow on them. It's like, chas v'shalom. Chas v'shalom. The Torah has to tell you not to do that. The Torah has to tell you shouldn't do that. And that's cool. Of course, the problem is, obviously you knew this since Leviticus. In fact, the Torah in Sefer Vayikra gave you a very long laundry list of different types of mumin, of different types of blemishes that you're not allowed to bring on the altar. So you're not merely repeating the prohibition of the Asherah, the idolatry, and the Matseva, the monument, you're also repeating the fact that I can't bring a shiur that has a mum. You can't bring a sacrifice that has a blemish. All three of those things are repeated. So why are you repeating them? But the fact that you're repeating them is not the only problem. You are interrupting the regularly scheduled program to repeat them in the middle of a thought. The Torah is telling you about Parshat Shoftim, for crying out loud. The Torah is telling you this is the justice system. You have to set up courts. Here's how they're going to operate. These are the things you're not allowed to do. This is how you're going to adjudicate capital punishment. The witnesses have to be this sorts of sets. And then in the middle of telling me about the judges, you stop telling me about the judges. You stop telling me about the justice system. You remind me that I'm not allowed to have an idolatry, a monument, or an animal that's bad for sacrifice. And then you go back to the judges. So it's so bizarre. I mean, it's just so bad. Oh my gosh. It's so bad. Oy, oy, oy. Yeah. How do you get around that? So, let's take a little bit of a deeper look, shall we? When the Torah tells you, you have to have shoftim v'shotrim, judges and officers. And it says, v'shaftu es ha'mishpat tzedek. You will adjudicate the people righteously. Do you think the next pasuk is going to give you 3 different examples of the negation of that? Obviously not. Obviously, whatever the Torah is telling you in the second pasuk, it didn't already tell you in the first pasuk. It didn't. And here's why. Let's take a nice look at the second pasuk. I already know that I have to judge righteously. V'shoftu es ha'mishpat tzedek. You will judge the people righteously. Next words, lo Tateh Mishpat, which they translate over here, I believe. Yes, you shall not pervert judgment. You can't pervert justice. Except the word lahatot does not mean to pervert. Okay, that's a mistranslation. That is imprecise. That is imprecise. It's worse than imprecise. It's a bad translation. The word lo Tateh Mishpat. Sateh? What does that word sound like? What did Moshe carry with him wherever he went? A staff. How do you say staff? Mateh. It's the same word, isn't it? It's the same word. In fact, did you know that in a Jewish court, a typical Jewish court, at least for matters of finances, has 3 judges? Not for now, but there's good reasons for that. So you have 3 judges. What happens if there's an argument? It's 2 against 1. What happens? I said, well, majority rules. How do you know that? How do you know majority rules? You say, well, because that's intuitive. No, it's not. It's not intuitive that majority rules. Perhaps we require unanimity. Maybe everyone has to be unanimous in order to render a verdict. Maybe it's a hung jury if it's not unanimous. Or perhaps we go with the smartest one on the Bezdin, whoever knows the most, whoever wins the Jeopardy game. Maybe that's the guy that we should go with. It's not intuitive. It's a pasuk in the Torah. Whoa, I just had deja vu. I made this mistake. When I went to Ner Yisrael for my Bechina for 9th grade, I went and I sat down to take a farher, what they call a test, with Rabbi Tendler, Olav Shalom, and Rabbi Cook. And we were learning Sanhedrin. As a matter of fact, we were doing Sanhedrin. It was the 7th parak, Arba Misas Nimsur Lebezdin, which I learned with Rabbi Benzer, Olav Shalom, which was awesome. He was an incredible Rebbe and a beautiful man. And one of the questions after I gave over, the Gemara, I showed them I knew how to read. This is what Rashi says, right? Rabbi Tendler asked me why majority rules, and I said to him, because obviously majority rules, because otherwise how could you ever get anything done? You can't expect everyone to be unanimous. And he was pushing me on it, and I was pushing back, b'chol kochi, with all my, I'm like, this is obvious. And then he shows me, he was like, no, you missed it. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi shows you that in fact it's a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Parshat Mishpatim. The pasuk says, Achrei Rabim lahatos, which means majority rules. So the reason that majority rules in the Torah is because the Torah says so. Achrei Rabim lahatos. But did you hear the words? Achrei Rabim, Achrei after, Rabim the majority, lahatot, to turn. Here it says lo Tateh Mishpat. It's the same word. It doesn't mean to pervert justice. It means don't turn justice. Do you hear it now? Don't turn justice. The pasuk's not saying don't lie. Don't do something that's not. We already said in the first sentence, V'shaftu esa'am mishpat tzedek. You have to adjudicate righteously. So when it says lo Tateh Mishpat, it means don't turn the law. And you say, what do you mean? I'm doing everything legal. Everything's on the up and up. Everything's 100% righteous. It's 100% righteous. I'm just going to go after them with RICO. Lo Tateh Mishpat. Don't turn the law to your own ends. You say, what do you mean? It is Mishpat Tzedek. It's Mishpat Tzedek. I'm an attorney. I'm Alan Dershowitz. I'm the world's greatest attorney. And I'm telling you that I can make a really good legal case for X. Says the Pasuk, Lo Tateh Mishpat. Just because that's the law, you could make it the law? Don't turn the Mishpat. Don't turn the Mishpat. That's that Pasuk is saying. You say, I'm perfectly legal. It's righteous. It's righteous because you know how to make the law go that way. Don't do that. That's not the intent of the law. Lo Tateh Mishpat. Lo sakir panim. Don't recognize faces. So you tell me I can't play favorites? Obviously I can't play favorites. That's not what we're saying. Says the Gemara, says, you know what? Imagine you got like an old man and a young man, and they're engaged in a monetary dispute. You're like, listen, obviously I'm gonna adjudicate this case properly. I'm not biased. I don't know either of them. They're both lovely. I'm sure they both have the greatest of intentions. But listen, this is an old man. I'm not gonna make him stand. He can't stand when he gives testimony. Have you seen him? He's got knobbly knees. He's got a walking stick. I'm going to let him sit. Obviously, the younger man, he's got no problem standing. So he can stand nicely at attention while he delivers his testimony. And then this guy, his baldavar, his adjudicant, he will sit because he's also... Lo sakir panim. Lo sakir panim. You can't let the old man sit and make the other guy stand. Then why not? I'm not perverting justice. It's not about the perversion of justice. Because in this case... you are going to get into the head of the other litigant. Because the young man is going to be like, oh man, the other guy's sitting. That's favoritism. And then he's going to start getting nervous. And once he starts getting nervous, he gets tongue-tied. He starts to schwitz. And then you know what happens, right? He loses his ability to claim for himself in the best possible way. So it says the Gemara, Lo sakir panim, you have to make sure you talk to them the same. You have to make sure that they either both sit or they both stand. You have to make sure that they're both dressed in similar ways so that one doesn't look so much better than the other. Lo sakir panim means don't have an advantage to either one of them. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't show favoritism to one. That's obvious you shouldn't show favoritism to one. I would have known that from the first pasuk where it says, V'shaftu esa'am mishpat tzedek, that you have to judge righteously. But from judging righteously, it wouldn't be obvious that I can't let a guy sit down if he's old. And therefore, the Gemara says, according to the Torah, Lo sakir panim. V'lo sikach shochad. And don't take a bribe. You can say, well, obviously I don't need a reason for why I can't take a bribe. That's good. Well, clearly the Torah is not saying don't take a bribe to lie. How do you know that? Well, because it said Lo Tateh Mishpat, don't pervert justice, right? Don't turn the justice, and that's in the turning Gedol Mizu. That is obviously turning, and because the original pasuk said V'shaftu esa'am mishpat tzedek, and if you take a bribe, you're not judging righteously. Okay, well, if you look at Rashi answers your question. Rashi says, V'lo sikach shochad? Look at Rashi. Rashi says, V'lo sikach shochad, afilu lishpot tzedek. Even to judge righteously. Don't take a bribe to judge righteously. You're like, well, what does that look like? I'll tell you what it looks like. Rich guy walks into court, and he's like, I really respect you, rabbis. I really respect you, rabbis. I think that you guys, you're fighting the good fight. Like, I'm out there, I'm making my money in real estate. I'm worth $1.6 billion. I'm doing very well. And, I think you guys should be supported. So I want to give $100,000 to the court on the condition that you continue to judge with utmost sincerity. That's why I'm giving this $100,000. I am giving this $100,000 to the court on the condition that you only adjudicate faithfully. Says Rashi, the Torah says, the second he put the money down, you no longer have the ability to judge righteously. That's the chiddush of the pasuk. The pasuk is coming to tell you that even when you think you're judging righteously, not when you know you're lying, that's not what the pasuk is coming to say. The pasuk is coming to say that if there was any sort of bribe that came your way, even if it was to judge righteously, you can't. And now the Torah gives you the two different ways that you can't. Because as we asked before, you have to give me two reasons why I can't take a bribe. It's subtle. there are two different things that become perverted in your mind when you've gotten an advantage, which we will call a bribe. Number one, ki hashochad, because the bribe, ye'aver einei chachamim, will blind the eyes of the wise, v'salef divrei tzadikim, and will mix up the words of the righteous. These are two very different things. Let's see how they're different. It will blind the eyes of the wise. To whom does that refer? The judge. Me, the judge in this case. If I take a bribe from you, now the wise is blinded. I won't see the things that I would otherwise see. V'salef divrei tzadikim, and it will convolute and mix up and twist the words of the righteous. Whose words? Not mine. Theirs. Either the other judges or the litigants. So A, my ability to see as a judge has now been shifted, and B, my ability to hear you has been shifted when I take a bribe. And I want to give you a great example for this, because I think most people, if you would say this to them, they'd be like, nah, bro, I can take a check from for the shul and be like, listen, I appreciate that you gave the money, but please sit down, senor, because we only do things here on the up and up. I think that would be intuitive. Here's what it's saying. Very simple. I'll give you the best example in the world. Football. Football's always the best example. So you're watching your team, and it's it's 4th and 10, and your team's down by 5, and they're driving in the red zone, and there's 28 seconds left, and your guy goes, he's one timeout, and your guy goes across the middle, and the quarterback throws the ball, and it's about to hit him, and the cornerback is all over him, and the ref throws the flag, and immediately, when the ref throws that flag, there were 100% of the fans that were watching this, right? So there's 30 million people watching this game. I'll tell you something about all 30 million. 15 million of them said, great call, yeah! And 15 million of them, when the flag went up, went, whoa, what's going on, ref? Are you blind? Do you understand there's not one person from the 30 million that's lying to you? They're totally serious. They are convinced of what they saw, because they did in fact see. But that's shochad. That's shochad. That's bribery. When you have any inclination towards a particular person or a particular outcome or a particular team, what the Torah is saying to you is that the way that you process the information, both what you see and what you hear, is by definition twisted. That's what the pasuk is saying. So the pasuk says, "Ki hashochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salef divrei tzadikim." It's telling you the mechanics of how humans work. And there's this phenomenal Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Rav, Ikluhu Shpize Ledina, Rav went on a Shabbaton one time, right? He's a scholar in residence in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas, and then 5 years later, he did a nice shiur there, did a great speech, and then he goes back to Jerusalem, and 5 years later, he's sitting in the courtroom where he's Mr. Chief Justice, and in walk two guys, and he looks at one of them and he's like, are you from Wichita? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm from Wichita. He goes, didn't I stay in your house one time? I was like, yeah, you stayed in your house. You stayed in my house. You ate the star fruit. Yeah, I remember you gave good Dvar Torah in the shul. And Rav's like, yeah, I can't judge you. I can't judge you because you're my host. It was 5 years ago at a Shabbaton, buddy. Like, relax. But Rav, for some reason, thinks that he can't be objective about it. He's like, oh, it won't look good. So he figures he's gonna step down, and he recuses himself. He recuses himself, but he still wants to sit in the back and watch the proceedings because, after all, this is his host, And who knows? Maybe he'll want to go back and do another scholar in residency in Wichita. So he sits down. He sits down in the back of the pews, and he's watching the court proceedings. And the Gemara says, Rav is watching all this happen. He's like, oh, man, my guy's winning. My guy's winning. And remember, he can do that. He can favor his guy because he's not on the court, right? He's recused himself, so it's all good. And he's like, yeah. And then at the end, the verdict comes down, and it's like, boom, his guy lost. And Rav's like, whoa, I was convinced my guy was winning. But I see that those unbiased judges saw that my guy really lost. That's what shochad means. Shochad doesn't only mean a guy that slips you money under the table and says, do it this way, or says, hey, do it the honest way. Shochad can be that 5 years ago you were at his house at a Shabbaton, or you dated his sister, and now you're biased, and you don't even recognize it. That's shochad. That's shochad. Now, the next pasuk, tzedek tirdov, justice you shall pursue. It's like, you told me to judge righteously. That's true. I told you v'shaftu asa mishpat tzedek. You will judge the people, a judgment that is righteous. Now I'm telling you a completely different verb. It doesn't say tzedek, tzedek tishbot. Righteousness, righteousness, you shall adjudicate. You shall judge. I said tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Tirdof means to chase, means to pursue. When I say pursue, I don't mean, you know how you kind of like pursue your goals. You pursue your goals, you chase your dreams. I don't mean that. I mean chase the way Aaron Donald chases the quarterback to eat him. I mean, you must chase this in a way that it's going to take 2 7-foot-tall, 350-pound men to delay you by 4 seconds. That's what I mean by chase. The Torah tells you it's not enough to judge righteously. You have to chase the righteousness twice. Tzedek, tzedek. Righteousness, righteousness. Why is one righteousness insufficient? Because one righteousness, you say, I did the right thing, and I know I did the right thing, and I'm good. Righteousness, righteousness means when you're done with what you thought you were correct about, run it again. Run it again. Do it better. Do more righteousness. However righteous you think you are, do it again. Says the Gemara, Haloch Har HaBayis yafeh. It's not enough to have a great court in town and to be like, well, you know, we got this great court with Rabbi Himmelfarb and Rabbi Feivelkohn, and it's really, really good. It says the Gemara, no. But you know, 45 minutes that way, there's a better court. There's a court with a bigger gadol. Haloch Har HaBayis yafeh. Go after a better court. Tzedek, tzedek. Righteousness, and then more righteousness you shall pursue. You shall chase. You shall chase as if he's got the pizza that you want. You really chase. Tirdof. Okay. Now what we have not answered, of course, Lo sitalach asherah kol eitz, lo sakim lecha matzifa, lo sizbach Hashem elokecha shor vaseh. For no reason, out of nowhere, you're telling me things that I already knew? You're telling me that I can't plant an asherah? Duh. I can't create a monument? Duh. I can't bring an animal with a mum? Duh. And you're telling me this in the middle of the statement on judges. That just doesn't compute at all. So, says the Gemara has a very interesting drasha on this. The Gemara says, from the fact that the pasuk said, Lo sitalach asherah kol eitz mizbeach Adonai lech asher ta'aseh lach, don't plant an idolatry next to mizbeach of Hashem, that shows you, says, why is this parsha, why is this paragraph next to a paragraph of dayanim, of judges, to tell you, kol hamaman dayan she'eno hagun ki'ilu nata asherah. Anyone who appoints a judge that is not worthy of being a judge, it's if he planted an idolatry, it's if he made a totem next to Hashem's altar. That's what the Gemara says. Again, I want to say that again, okay, for the cheap seats. The Gemara says, why is the prohibition of planting an idolatry next to the altar in the portion of the judges? It's to tell you, answers the Gemara, that if you appoint a judge that is not worthy, if you just made this person the judge because of some other political reason and not because they are the best person for the job, then it's as if you planted an idolatry on the Har HaBayis next to Hashem's Mizbeach. I mean, that sounds very nicely like polemic, because what does one have to do with the other? Like, oh, they're close together, so it's as if you did that. Like, is that what it's saying? Or is it really the same thing? So, in order to understand this, we said, why are you stopping in the middle from the discussion on judges when you double back and you come right back to the capital punishment bit? Like, okay. So in order to understand this properly, you have to recognize that Shoftim v'Shotrim is not the beginning of this parsha, of this paragraph. Now, it is the beginning of what you and I call the Sedra. It is the beginning of this week's portion. But in the Torah, that's an artificial delineation, because the Torah doesn't recognize a Sidra. It doesn't recognize a portion called Shoftim. It only recognizes outline form. It recognizes paragraphs. And the last meta paragraph, meaning the meta category that these things are all subcategories of, is, this will really blow your mind. If you go back to page 1022, for some reason, it's the last pesucha, the open break, which means the real category that all of these things are micro to, is Chag HaSukkos Ta'aseh Lecha Shivas Yamim, the holiday of Sukkot. Man, that's weird. The holidays of Sukkot. 3 times a year you're going to see the face of Hashem, your God, with all your males. B'chag ha'matzos, b'chag ha'shavuos, b'chag ha'sukkos. You're going to come 3 times for your Hajj, for your pilgrimage festival, and then all of a sudden, boom, apropos nothing, without a big break, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha. Which means that the judges are somehow a subcategory of what seems to be an issue of the holiday of tabernacles. That's nuts. Here's what the Torah is saying to you. All of these issues, they're not an issue of judgment per se. You know what category they fall in? The category of makom, place. Place. We are dealing with a very particular place. Which place would that be? Har HaBayis, the noble sanctuary, Al-Aqsa, yeah, the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, Hamakom. When it says on page 1022 on the previous page on Chag HaSukkos, it says Shivas Yamim Tachol Adonai Lehecho Bamakom Asher Yivchar Adonai. Shalosh Pamim Bashana Yireh Kol Zechorchas Pnei Adonai Lehecho Bamakom Asher Yivchar. You will come 3 times a year to the place where God chooses. Where's that place? Har HaBayis. Temple Mount. And as a subcategory, for some reason, of Hamakom, of temple place, which is in fact what most of last week's Parshat and Parshat Shoftim was talking about, I'm not going to go into that right now. So as a subcategory of the concept of Makom, the Torah says you'll have Shoftim, don't plant idolatrous trees, don't have a monument, don't bring animals that have a blemish, and kill idolaters. What do those 5 things have in common? The answer is makom, place. So if we can keep all of this on a shelf in our mind for just one moment, let's take a look at something incredible, unbelievable. Pasuk says at the very end of Parshat Yisro, Pasuk says, "V'mizbach avonim ta'aseh li," and if you make an altar of stones for me, lo sivnez hen gazis, don't make them hewn, carved. Because you will have waved your sword over it and you will have defiled it. Meaning, you cannot carve God's altar. It has to be natural stones. Okay? And the word for hewn, H-E-W-N, the word for carved is gazit. Gazit. Not the only time where you hear that word bandied about in the Torah is a place that we like to call Lishkas HaGazis, which means the hewn chamber. What's the hewn chamber? The Sanhedrin, the high court. The high court sits in a place called Lishkas HaGazis, the chamber that is carved. Now tell me, please, good sir, where is said chamber? On Har HaBayis, on the Temple Mount. Well, see, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, because you're telling me that on one side of the wall is a temple where there cannot be anything that is carved, and on the other side of a wall is a chamber that is called the chamber which is carved. Well, that's ironic. So why would that be? I think the issue is very simple, because when it comes to the worship of Hashem, when it comes to the karbanos, the services, and the ceremonies, your thoughts, your feelings, and your logic have nothing to do with how you're going to do this. It doesn't matter how you feel about God's service. If you don't like the wine, you still got to drink it and pour it. And if you don't like throwing blood at the wall, tough luck. You can't be a Kohen. Tough luck. This is how Hashem is served. There is no you. You do not exert control, as in carving, on the ceremony and on the worship. Do you know where you do exert control? On the other side of the wall, in the Sanhedrin, in the high court. Because when it comes to the laws, that's all you. That's all human. Your interpretation of the law defines the law. Your ability to carve and to hew is what makes the Sanhedrin what it is. which means that the reason that Shoftim V'Shotrim comes in the middle of the Pesucha of the Makom, in the middle of the meta category of place, is because that's where the Sanhedrin goes. The Sanhedrin lives on that mountain, on the other side of the wall. But it's not the only thing that goes there on the other side of the wall, you see, because it turns out that there are other laws that pertain to that very particular 1 square kilometer piece of real estate. For example, can you plant a tree on Har HaBayis? The answer is, you better not. Says the Torah, Lo sital Adonai Elohecha Asherah oy vey. Terrible. Lo sitalecha Asherah kol eitz. Do not plant in Asherah any tree. Any tree. If you do, let's see Rashi. Take a look at Rashi. We said it can't be that the pasuk is telling you that you can't plant an Asherah tree. You can't plant an idolatrous tree. You know you're not allowed to plant an Asherah tree. We said in the last 2 parshas you gotta rip out the idolatrous trees, you gotta burn the idolatrous trees. No. This is different. Says Rashi. Lo sitalach Asherah kol eitz eitzim mizbach Hashem Elokecha azhar lenotea ilan ulevon habayis bahar habayis. You see, if you plant any tree on Har HaBayis, it's an Asherah by definition. But it's not an Asherah, it's not an idolatry, it's my bonsai tree. I came with my family for Sukkot, for the holiday, and I brought my karbanos. I have all these carbon chagiga, and I got a carbon shlamim, and I got all this stuff. And I want to come up to Har HaBayis, and you know what? I brought my little beautiful bonsai tree, and I'm going to put my little beautiful bonsai tree right here on Har HaBayis. So I'm not going to worship it. It's just for beautification purposes. Just call me the gardener. Says the Torah, that's an Asherah. That's an Asherah. Any tree that you put on Har HaBayis, on the Temple Mount, is by definition an idolatry. You don't put trees here. Next pasuk. V'lo sakim lecha matzeva. And don't make a monument. So I know I can't make a monument. But what if I take a brick and I just want to build a little sandcastle over here on the corner? I'm not going to worship it. That's a monument. You can't build anything on Har HaBayis. The only things that you're allowed to put on Har HaBayis, on the Temple Mount, are the things that God prescribed to you. Any deviation above or beyond said things, if it is vegetable, it's called Asherah. If it is stone or brick or building material, it's called Matseva. If it is animal, that's the next pasuk. The next pasuk says, Lo sizbach. Do not sacrifice to Hashem any animal that has a mum or anything bad. But I already know that. Yes. You see, now we're not saying that there are certain animals that aren't worthy. We're going a step further. We're telling you that there is a din, there is a law of makom, a law of the place. This place has this very, very special place has certain categories of things that happen here, that are allowed to happen here. And they are very tightly controlled. And anything that deviates from those tightly controlled circumstances is a problem. Huge problem. Any kind of the wrong court. If it's the wrong court, we just said that on Har HaBayis itself sits Sanhedrin HaGadol, the seat of power of the Jewish judiciary, sits on Har HaBayis in a place that is called the carved chamber. Well, the only reason that they sit there is we're saying that their power emanates from the fact that Hashem chose this place. Which means, you want an example of this, by the way? I'll prove it to you. The pasuk tells us later about the Zaken Mamre. The Zaken Mamre is a big Talmud Chacham. He's a huge Rosh Hashiva, massive scholar, and he argues on the Sanhedrin. You know, the Sanhedrin thinks that the Sanhedrin thinks that triangle K is not kosher, and this big Rosh Hashiva says triangle K is kosher. So says the Gemara, Matzah nabes pagi v'himra lein yachot hamra samra tamalomar v'kamta alisa elam makom lamish makom goren. Which means, let's say we're in Aventura Mall, and the big Rosh Hashiva comes in contact with the members of the Sanhedrin, and they're all standing there in Damiani, and they say triangle K, it's not kosher, and then the big Rosh Hashiva says no, triangle K is kosher. So I say, 1 second, you're not allowed to argue with the Sanhedrin. If a big Rosh Hashiva argues on the Sanhedrin, we kill him. So you would think that just because they're arguing with the Sanhedrin, I'm going to kill him in Damiani in Aventura Mall. Says the Gemara, no, v'kamto ve'elisa elamakom malamish makom gorim. The place is determinative. which is to say, I can argue with the Sanhedrin as much as I like, provided that we're in summer camp. But if I go up on the place where they sit, in the chamber that is carved, and I argue with them over there, now you're a dead man. Meaning, the Sanhedrin only has the rules that come with the Sanhedrin when they sit in the Sanhedrin. And the place where the Sanhedrin sits is not about only the big powdered wigs and the geniuses in the benches. It has to be on the mountain. It has to be on the mountain, which means that Beis Din does not have the right to adjudicate capital punishment unless there's a temple on the other side of the wall. And now, all of a sudden, the Gemaras that talk about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we start to understand that the Sanhedrin self-exiled. The Sanhedrin, who sat on the Temple Mount itself, saw where the future was going, saw where all the arrows were pointing, and said, we're out of here. And they took away, they closed their own power. They gave up their own ability to judge capital punishment. And they left Lishkas HaGazis. They left that place, the makom. They left the makom. And where did they go? This is one of my favorites. This is a gift. You'll enjoy this. They went, of course, you already know, they went to Yavne. The Sanhedrin exiled itself from the makom, from the place, and it went to Yavne. Why'd they call it Yavne? Think. There you go. Very good. I know you got it. Yibane Amikdash, because the Sanhedrin is a function of the mikdash, of the holy temple that's on the other side of that wall, that's on the other side of Lishkas HaGazis. So if there is no Kohen doing the avoda on the other side, you can't do your capital punishment on this side. And therefore the beginning of Parshat Shoftim, of Shoftim v'Shoftim Tateh Mishpat, which is going to ostensibly tell you all of the laws of the justice system that you have to create, and then for some reason in the middle of it, apropos nothing, it tells you about idolatrous trees that you can't put there, and monuments that you can't put there, and animals that you can't put there. It's telling you about all the things that do go there and their inverse perversions. So what you're not allowed to do is anything other than what I specifically prescribed for you to go in this very particular place called the Makom, the place, also known as the Temple Mount, Har HaMoriah. Of course, you know Har HaMoriah, says the Gemara. Why is it called Har HaMoriah? Mipnei shemisham yotze hora'ah liYisrael. Moriah means hora'ah. Moreh, Morah, Torah, Hora'ah. If you've ever seen the smicha of a rabbi, it says Yoreh, Yoreh be'isur v'heter. He gives you Hora'ah, Moriah. He gives you the show. He shows you what to do. He demonstrates for you. Al pi Torah asher yorucha, it says in this week's parsha. The pasuk tells you the Torah that they teach you, that they show you, that they give to you. It's called Hora'ah. That mountain is the mountain of Hora'ah. It is the mountain from which emanates our ability to create justice. And that ability is only in its totality when on the other end of it there is a Kohen who stands upon God's Mizbeach and does it properly. And the other things that are supposed to go on this place are eitzim, wood, in a very particular way. Because if you put eitzim in any way that doesn't belong there, boom, it's an idolatry. And the stones that are here have to be in a very particular way. And if they're carved, they're no good. And if you make a sandcastle over there, it's a monument. And animals have to be put here in a very specific way. But if they're done in anything wrong, kol davara, even if your thought process is off, mefagel bekodshim, then it's a toeva of Hashem. Only at a time where everything jives perfectly, the way that Hashem wants it, in the makom, in the place that He wills it. Only then do we have the perfect justice system with the epicenter of the universe. Have an amazing Shabbos.